Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fit Lawyer Pod. Today is going to be a solo episode, so just yours truly. And as much as I've enjoyed the conversations with our previous guests, I wanted to take this time to kind of reflect back on the previous year. So much has happened since November of 2022. Some relationships ended. I gained new friends, and I've actually rekindled some relationships that I lost touch with. Um, and I every year, I think everybody has ups and downs in their life, and um, mine is no different. So I I want to end on a good note. So I'll start with kind of where I was a year ago. And actually, last November, I was in Europe. So I went to Europe with someone and for someone. And as of right now, I am no longer in contact with either of those people. Not the person I went to Europe with, and not with the person I went to Europe for. And that sounds horrible, right? Like I feel like the common denominator in this situation, but um, sometimes you just gotta let people go. And if if people are not supporting you or bringing you any positivity in your life, then I definitely think it's okay to let people go, and that's both like romantically and platonically. I think a lot of people look at both romantic relationships and platonic friendships like, oh, they've been together since high school, or they're high school sweethearts, or we read stories about couples that's been married for 60, 70 plus years, and we're just in so much admiration of that. And I am too. Like I think that's beautiful, but I think we also need to look at the quality of those relationships. It's not just about quantity, it's also about quality. And I I think I feel that way because both sets of my grandparents, my paternal and my maternal grandparents, were married for decades, right? It was a different time in China. People didn't really get divorced, so I think everybody in that generation in China was married for their whole life, like with their OG spouses. It's a different story now in China, but back then it was very common, and I recognized the stark contrast between my mom's parents and my dad's parents. They were both married for decades and decades, but with my dad's parents, there was a lot of domestic violence. Even though I only lived in China for about 5 years, for the first 5 years of my life, I remember my paternal grandparents fighting, arguing, getting physical. Whereas that was not a thing with my maternal grandparents. They were, both sides were really poor. It was, communist China. But I just always saw a better relationship with my mom's parents. And I've always kind of envied. I've always kind of envied that, like they didn't have anything. They didn't have money. They didn't have wealth, but they just really supported each other through everything and the hard times. Um, and I think, now when we go on social media and we see these stories about these couples, we're all just so envious, like, oh my God, they've been married for 67 years. But I think it's also important to look at, the quality of that relationship. And I think that goes for the same for friendships as well, right? Like I I'm so lucky and so blessed to still have my best friend from fourth grade, and we are in total different walks of life. She is a wife and mother of two. I'm doing this shit single as fuck, still swiping and still going on shitty dates. Um, and I, even though I want what she has, right? Like I aspire to be a wife and mother as well, but I'm not going to settle for any relationship just because I have an end goal. It's really, really important for me that I'm in the relationship and that I'm in the marriage that I want to be in. I spoke a little bit about my grandparents, and unfortunately, my parents' relationship and their marriage before they got divorced was closer to my paternal grandparents' relationship. I grew up witnessing a lot of domestic violence in the house. Um, when I was in middle school and high school, the cops were called to my house for domestic violence. And I grew up in a small town in Oregon. So basically, the school knew, my classmates knew, the teachers, the parents. It was a small town. Everybody just knew everybody's business. So even though I I know what I know what I want, I'm not gonna settle for anything less. I rather I rather be good all by myself than be in a relationship where someone's going to bring me down, someone's going to not support me, who's going to slut shame me, who's going to criticize my Instagram, who's going to sneakily go through my phone while being super sneaky himself and being passive aggressive and just not healthy, like I'm not a perfect person. Obviously, I'm not a perfect friend. I'm not a perfect girlfriend, and I'm not a perfect daughter. But when I do mess up, I do take the time to reflect and think about my actions. And personally, for me, I could never be like forced into an apology. Like I literally cannot apologize if I don't feel sorry. If I'm going to stand by what I did or what I said, that I'm going to stand by it. I'm not going to give an apology just to soothe over the situation or because somebody demanded it or be like, okay, I'm sorry. Like that to me is not a genuine apology. Like if I give an apology, it's thought out. Like, hey, person, I've had some time to think and I'm sorry for blank because blank and and I don't give that apology just to receive forgiveness. I give that apology because I had the chance to reflect and I want to let them know that I recognize my actions were wrong and that they were hurtful. And on the same token, I don't understand when people demand apologies. Like, first of all, an apology doesn't really do anything. It's not going to pay my bills. It's not going to make me unfeel what it made me feel when it happens. It simply is just an acknowledgement. Like for me, it's simply just an acknowledgement that you recognize what you did was hurtful and wrong, and to own up to that. Which is why I personally will never force an apology out of somebody. If they're not sorry for their actions, then they're not sorry for their actions, and that's fine. Then we can part ways, or we can take a break in our friendship or a relationship or whatever needs to be. And they say that time heals everything, which I don't agree with, right? Time may make the emotions from certain events die down a little bit, but I think deep down that pain is there and that scar is there. What is said can never be unsaid. What is done can never be undone. And I once read or heard from somewhere that anger is like a hot coal that only burns yourself and those people near you. So one thing I'm really working on, I have been working on, is learning to forgive without an apology, as well as wishing them well from afar and loving them from afar. The two Europe individuals, I've known both of them for a long time, and I have not had, so still present tense, deep love for both individuals, and I still wish both of them well in their personal and their professional life. And that goes for everybody that was once in my life that are no longer in my life, or people that I had a close relationship with that I no longer have a relationship with, be it romantic or platonic, because at the end of the day, like, we shared some beautiful times together, we shared some beautiful memories together. Maybe they were there for me during a hard time when I needed it, vice versa. Maybe I provided them some comfort that brought us closer. But if if this is the end of the road or end of the journey for us, then it is what it is. I accept that, and I don't want to harbor any ill feelings towards that. And I wish them well, and I will always cherish the times that we did have together. And for me, is I'll always hold on to the good memories, and but that doesn't mean that I don't remember what you did to me. Right? I can forgive, but that doesn't mean I forget. And I can wish you well, but also not wish you back into my life. Wow, this is this is getting deeper than I thought, and that then deeper than what I expected as well. But that, I guess that's just life, No matter what you think, no matter what you expected or hoped for, or what you planned for, God may have different plans, and you just got to roll with the punches. And speaking of God, who is so great, one thing I've also been working on since last November is really strengthening my faith, and that has just been so healing and so therapeutic for me. I was going to a all women's Bible study, and that felt really safe for me because I'm still very, how do I want to say it, very shy or very unsure in my faith. So the all women's Bible study just felt nice because it felt very like a very safe environment for me to share and hear other girls' stories. And when that ended, some of the girls from that group introduced me to a co-ed Bible study, which was a little intimidating at first because it was a much larger group and there were men there, um, and just a lot more people that I didn't know, but it turned out great. That group has now grown into a full-blown church. So I go to church every week. I go to Bible study every week. And the girls actually started a women's book club, which meets on Zoom every Monday. And I'll put all of my church's information in the description below because I'm so thankful for them, and I'm so thankful for the group, the congregation, and just all the connections I made there. And sometimes, as sad as it is when certain relationships end, it makes room for new relationships, like all the friends I made from Bible study. I've just grown really, really close with a lot of these girls, and I feel very comfortable opening up to my pastor, about whatever it is that is going on in my life. And I think it took losing those relationships and gaining my church relationship to give me the strength, the strength and the need to reconnect and rekindle the relationship with my dad. Whew, okay, I can do this. For those that know, my dad and I had an estranged relationship for about 7 years, and that is mostly because of me. I was not open and I was not receptive to a relationship with him after my parents divorced. For me, it was kind of like, okay, cool, good riddance. Now I don't have to deal with you ever. Like I said earlier, I grew up with a lot of domestic violence in the house, and I think I just grew up with the idea and the mentality that he was the bad guy, right? But I know that he has his own traumas and he had his own hardships. And maybe he didn't have the privilege to introspect and think about what's going to make him happy and what's going to make him the best husband and father, because he was on survival mode. He came to the US with nothing but debt. Like, some people say they came here with nothing. Like, he came here in the negatives. He borrowed money in China from friends, from family, to come here and start a new life. He left his wife and newborn child, me, back in China, and coming to a new country that he's never been before. I know that I lived the life I do today because of the sacrifices and the hardships that he went through. And it's crazy because I've said that to people in person and I'm super comfortable saying it on camera now, but I have actually never said that to my dad. And I can't really pinpoint why. I think it's just because growing up, we didn't talk about our feelings. We didn't talk about our emotions. They went to work, made the money, took care of the house, did what parents were supposed to do. I went to school, got good grades, went to college, went to law school, did what I was supposed to do. And the idea of talking about your feelings and growing as a family wasn't really a thing. We didn't talk about our feelings or our emotions. So, oh gosh, that was kind of rambling, but yeah. So I think, like I said earlier, I think it took losing those relationships, gaining my church relationships to really give me the strength and the desire to reach out to my dad. And I did. So I visited him twice this year, once in January and once in September. And I think it gave me a lot of healing. I think it gave me more healing than I really expected. And when I saw my dad in January, after 7 years, which was longer than we were apart when he first came to the US and when my mom and I came, because he came here when I was 2, not quite 2, and then my mom and I came here when I was 5. So uh, I don't know the exact dates, but around 4 years was when he was here in the US by himself, which is a pretty long time, to be in a country by yourself with no family, just struggling, working as much as he could to send money back for my mom and I, as well as all the cost of immigration, which of course isn't cheap either. So that was pretty much double the time when we were estranged for pretty much twice as long as when he first came to the US. And these 7 years we were all in the US together. And I was actually in Florida when he was living there. I went on a cruise with one of the people from Europe that I'm no longer in contact with, but um I was actually in Florida at the same time he was, and I didn't bother to make the short drive up or the quick plane ride up to see him because I just had no desire. So when I saw him after 7 years earlier this year, I genuinely like broke down. I no longer saw the oh, I said I wasn't gonna cry. I no longer saw the violent, angry man that I remember. I just saw a 60 plus year old guy with his own traumas, with his own difficulties, doing the best that he can with the tools that he was given. He didn't grow up in a functional home, he grew up with a violent father. And listening to how he grew up, he already feels like he's done so much and a much better dad than his dad was to him. I remember him telling me that they only got eggs on their birthday because food was rationed and they couldn't eat eggs every day or meat every day. So you only got eggs on your birthday. And that his only memory of affection from my grandfather was cutting their fingernails. So him and his siblings would line up, and my grandpa would cut all their fingernails before school on Monday because I guess schools in China back in the 70s or whatever require certain nail length. I don't know. A whole different story. But, when I saw him, it was all the anger I had just disappeared. All the memories of the past really kind of disappeared, and I just saw him for who he was at that moment. And it really changed me, because I think I held on to that anger and that resentment for so long. And like I said earlier, that hurt and that resentment only burned me and the people close to me, such as my dad. He's told my mom multiple times, like, oh, it's been X amount of years since I saw Julia. Or when he knew that I was in Florida, he asked my mom, like, oh, why didn't she come see me? And even one of my cousins, he went out to see my dad in Florida, and he came back and told me how much my dad missed me. And it actually made me angry because I know, even though that they were they had great intentions of, reconnecting and reuniting family, I felt like whenever they told me I should reach out to my dad or I should reconnect with my dad, it felt like an attack on me. Like, but you didn't see what he did to my childhood, or you don't know the things I went through, or you don't know why I need to cut him out of my life. Like, whatever reason it was. But, like I said, when I saw him in January, I was genuinely able to just forgive him for all the trauma that he caused, because I just saw a man with his own trauma who did the best that he could. And at the end of the day, he worked hard. He always, I didn't have to worry about food or shelter growing up. And I didn't even have to worry about, paying for school, because school was something that my parents super encouraged. So the deal was they paid tuition and I paid for cost of living. That's how it was in college. That's how it was in law school. Even though I got scholarships for both schools, I didn't get I didn't get like the cash equivalent of the scholarship amount that I got. So yes, even though they paid for tuition, technically I paid for tuition too with my scholarships, but I did pay for cost of living. Um, and they would have paid for the cost of living. I know they would have. I'm an only child, but I chose to pay for my own cost of living because I didn't want my parents to criticize me for my lifestyle. I definitely did a lot of partying in college and law school. Uh, so we'll leave it at that. And I didn't want them to say anything like, oh, you just taking our money to go drink or go party, go this and that. So they just paid for school and I paid for my own lifestyle. We weren't rich by any means. Like I said, my dad came here with negative dollars, just a buttload of debt in China. And they just worked their ass off. They got their first hotel in Oregon and, has been in the hospitality industry ever since. Even though I personally never had to worry about food or shelter growing up, it was also like, well, I wanted certain things that I wasn't able to have, not necessarily because we couldn't afford it, but just with my parents' immigrant mentality, they didn't feel like it was worth it. I remember wanting, some Hollister, some Abercrombie stuff in high school, and my parents just felt like $20 for a t-shirt or, $60 for a pair of jeans was just outrageous when you can go to Ross and TJ Maxx and get that shit for like a third of the price. But high school Julia felt like she needed the Hollister t-shirts and the Abercrombie t-shirts and jeans and whatever. Um, so that also caused a lot of strain on my parents' side relationship. Um, because even though like we weren't rich and I wasn't able to get some of the stuff I felt like I should have because everybody else had it, um, they gave me everything I needed. And they gave me what was important, because I know I would not be here today without the education I received. I know I wouldn't be here today if they didn't help me pay for college and law school because student debt, student loan is a fucking scam. Okay. I took out student loans so tangent real quick. We're going to talk money, honey. Student loans, it's a scam. Straight bullshit. I didn't know that until I became an adult. I don't know why the US government wants to scam teenagers trying to get an education, but my student loans, the interest on that shit was like 6.5%, maybe even more. It was between 6.5 and 7%. And then when I became an adult and I bought my first car, the interest rate on my car was like 1.99, and then or 2.99. It was like 2.99, and then when I bought my condo, my interest on the condo was like 3.9 something. So the US government is really going to charge you pretty much double the interest rate as than if you were to get a loan for a home or a car. How fucking wild is that? And as high school kids, you don't know how interest work. You don't know about compounding interest. They teach you y equals mx plus b, but they don't teach you how loans work and how interest rates work and APRs and shit like that. So it wasn't until I bought my car, my condo, I realized what a fucking scam student loans were. But luckily, like I said, I didn't have that much because I really only took out loans in law school. All throughout college, I went home and worked at the hotel during weekends and not weekends, excuse me, when I was on break. And throughout high school, I worked at my parents' hotel as well as at a Chinese restaurant. So I've been working since I was 13 years old at my parents' very first hotel. And even before then, I would go with them in the farmers market and do a little hustle there. You know what I'm saying? Do a little uh, buy and flip. So I've always been a working gal, I guess, and that's also thankful. That's also because of my parents. I've seen how they had to struggle, and they didn't give me pocket money or spending money. So money I wanted to use for snacks, whatever I wanted to do that they didn't approve of, I had to work and earn that. And I think growing up, I was a little resentful for that because it was like, well, her parents pay for all of prom. They pay for her dress. They pay for her to get her hair done. They paid for the limo, but I had to pay everything myself. And I think I was a little bit resentful of that. But as I get older, I'm so thankful for that because they taught me the value of a dollar. They they taught me not to take things for granted, not to take money for granted. Even though my parents are doing well now, they still have a very frugal mindset. We have a very different relationship with money because we grew up different. They remember what it was like to be hungry, to not have food, or the only food they had that day was rice or bread. Um, so so seeing my dad after all those years really was a healing process, a healing event for me, and I hope that it was a healing event for him as well. And then when I went back to see him in September, it was a little bit more turbulent than it was in January because, again, he's a 60 plus year old man. He's set in his ways. Um, and it's up to me to control my reactions. And that's another thing I'm working on is to take pause when somebody says something or when somebody does something, to take pause and take the time to respond rather than react. I can be very reactive. I always say you can take the girl out the bay, but you can't take the bay out the girl. Yeah, I grew up in Oregon; those are my formative years. But when I first got to the U.S., I was in the Bay Area. That's where I met my best friend in fourth grade, and I was in the Bay Area from first grade to seventh grade, and then I did seventh grade all the way to college in Oregon, and then I came down to San Diego for law school. I went to 3 middle schools in 2 years. That was hell. Whole different episode. But like I said, you can take the girl out the bay, but you can't take the bay out the girl. And I always tell people that, or now people nowadays, that you're lucky that you're meeting the post law school Julia who now knows Jesus. Because if you met pre law school, pre Jesus Julia, it was not cute. I was not physically cute. My attitude was not cute, and I was ready to swing because I grew up having to defend myself. I didn't feel safe at home. I didn't feel safe at school. I was, bullied for being Asian, for my eyes, for whatever. And then when I first started first grade here, I didn't speak English. And then 3 middle schools in 2 years. That was hell. And then high school was better, and college was fine, and law school was fine. But um, I grew a very defensive attitude, and that is also something I'm learning to work on. is my temper and my reaction, as well as mending the relationships that are important to me. Um, you know, going back to earlier, um, I'm blessed and I'm lucky that I still have my best friend from fourth grade who I met in the Bay Area, even when I moved up to Oregon. Um, before the days of social media, we kept in touch by writing letters. And despite the fact that our lives went very different directions, we stayed in touch. We were we're both very low maintenance friends, right? Like we don't need to call each other every day. We don't need to be like, "Hey, I miss you, love you, blah 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 blah." Like we can go weeks or months without talking, and then when we do speak, it's we're just as close as ever. And now that we've entered adulthood, I really see both her and her sisters as family. Like I most of my family are still in China, and close friends from Oregon. I still keep in touch with a couple friends from middle school and high school that I went to school with in Oregon, but I can genuinely say that there's no friendship like the one that Danica and I have. She's my friend from middle school, or my friend from fourth grade. There's just no relationship like the one that Danica and I have, and I'm so blessed and I'm so thankful for that. And even though we went very different paths in life, she kind of led a crazy life. I went the very academic route. Um, there's just always been a mutual understanding, a mutual support, and there's just been like nothing but love between us. And even when we have disagreements, there's a mutual understanding that it's not malicious, all right? Like people are different, people have different ideas, people have different thoughts, but for her and I, it's just always been love and super supportive because I think there were friendships that I held on to for longer than necessary because of the history, because it was like, oh, I've known this person since forever, and we've experienced so much together, and this and that you hold on to these friendships simply because it was a long friendship, not because they're adding any additional value to your life. Um, and ultimately that blew up in my face. But for me, both friendships and relationships should add value. I hope that I add value to all of my friends' lives, and then if and when I do get in a relationship, I hope I add value to my man's life, because I don't want a partner or friends in my life who's going to gaslight me, who's going to reach out to my people and tell them I have a mental disorder, that I need therapy, and pretty much defame me. Like to reach out directly to my tenant, someone I have a business relationship with, about my mental health, like that to me is not a friend. Like no matter what your intentions are, like that's wildly out of line for you. And even setting aside the legality part, because that is defamation, even setting aside the legality part, like that's just not cool to me. And quite frankly, that makes me fearful, right? Like, I don't want somebody in my life that's literally going to go out of their way to reach out to people in my life who they don't even know, right? Like, I've built a whole different life in San Diego. I'm not the same girl I was in college back in Oregon, or in grade school in the Bay Area. Like, I'm a whole grown ass woman with a career, um, living in San Diego as I have been for the past decade. So for someone to reach out to someone that they don't even know to speak on my mental health is wildly out of line for me. And quite frankly, it makes me fearful of what they're going to do next. Like that to me is just straight maliciousness. And I think if I listened to my own gut, to my own instincts earlier, I I should have just slowly separated myself from that relationship. But again, I held on for history. Um, and I allowed them to gaslight me, and I kept gaslighting myself as well, right? Because relationships are hard to let go, whether they're romantic or platonic. Any relationship is hard to let go. Um, or at least for me, like I guess here's the thing for me, right? Like if I just met you or if it's like a first date, then it's not that serious. If the vibe isn't right, then the vibe isn't right and I'm out. I have no problems blocking dudes. I have no problems letting dudes know that hey, there's not a connection. Deuces. But when I do fucks with you, I fucks with you hard. Okay? And I'm a ride or die type of girl. I hate saying that. I don't know where that term comes from. Why do we gotta die? I don't want to die, but I'm gonna ride with you. And that goes for romantic relationships and friendships. I've always been super picky about my romantic relationships. I've had 2 serious relationships, one in high school. Yes, we were in high school, but it was serious. Okay. I genuinely thought that I was going to marry that boy. We went to different colleges, but then I just figured, hey, after college, we move in together, have some husband and wife time before we start a family. I had zero doubt that in high school, I had zero doubt that I was going to marry my high school boyfriend by the time we were 25 or 26. And we have a whole ass family by now. I'm almost 32. Obviously, that didn't happen. And I'm super thankful for that because if that did happen, I would probably still be in small town Oregon raising kids. But I've got to experience so much since then. And then my last serious relationship was in adulthood, and that was the first partner I lived with. And again, I also thought I was gonna marry him and have children, but that also didn't happen. And I think I spent so much time trying to make that relationship work, even after we broke up, even after he moved out. I still spent so much time and so much effort into making that relationship work when deep down, like I think I knew it wasn't going to work. But again, when I fucks with you hard, and it was just so hard for me to let go of that relationship. And then I think a part of me was like, well, maybe we could be friends. No, we can't be friends because for one, I don't want to be friends with anybody who I've had sex with. Like that I don't fuck my friends, okay? I have a lot of guy friends. I don't fuck them. Um that's just not me. Like I had friends with benefits before? Yes. But once the benefits end, so does the friend part. And I'm not trying to be friends with someone who I had a relationship with. Um I'm just not. That's just me. I know some people are cool with their exes. Um, and I think it's different if you have kids. I definitely think it's important to have a cordial relationship for the children if you guys have kids. Thankfully, I didn't have kids with either of those dudes. So we don't need to have a cordial relationship. But at the end of the day, like I said in the very beginning, I still wish them well personally, professionally, but I just don't wish them back into my life. And, with this upcoming holidays, I'm genuinely just so thankful where my life is now. In the past year, like I said, relationships were lost, new relationships were made, relationships were rekindled. I did 2 bodybuilding shows where I actually placed, and I placed decent. I placed second and third, which is a stark contrast to my first 2 shows where I came home empty handed and brokenhearted. Um, I got a new roommate. I'm growing my faith, and I'm just embracing me. I'm embracing womanhood, and I think I finally give less fucks about people's opinion, which is why I feel comfortable starting this podcast. Because growing up with my Chinese parents, there was always the saying that the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Because that's how it was in China. Like you don't speak up against the regime. Definitely not in not definitely not back in the day. You remember Tiananmen Square? Well, I don't remember Tiananmen Square either, but you can Google it, okay? In China, they ran people over with tanks for speaking their mind and for speaking up against the government. So that's just the mentality my parents had, and that's the mentality that I grew up with. But America is a country of free speech. There is a caveat, right? There's certain speeches that are still illegal. So I don't know them off the top of my head because constitutional law was a long time ago, but America is a country of free speech with a caveat, and I think that is so powerful. Um, and I want to exercise my constitutional right of free speech because not everybody has that. Um, and I finally feel brave enough to speak my truth and and I finally feel brave enough and strong enough to speak my truth. And I don't want this to sound like I'm bashing on my parents or I'm bashing on the people I'm no longer in a relationship with, but simply just me telling my story, my experiences, my upbringings, my relationships, past, present, and the relationships I aspire for in the future. Just really for me to reflect back on on the year and soapbox a little bit. Um, and I'm very, very excited for the upcoming new year. Even if nobody listens to this podcast or this doesn't grow, it's still just something that I still want to pursue. This is for the first time that I'm pursuing a passion project without the thought of money, like if it's going to monetize. Obviously, if it does, great. If not, I still want to continue doing this. I still want to continue interviewing people, giving people a chance to share their stories and use this as my personal diary and soapbox and share with you guys what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and what is going on in my life. Um, so yeah, so that's what's up. And I think I'm gonna wrap it up for today. I've said a lot. Yeah, so I guess I'll end with just count your blessings, be kind, be thankful, don't be reactive, don't be spiteful, don't be vengeful, and forgive yourself, forgive those that did you wrong. Yeah, just be a good fucking human. Nobody's perfect, but I'm trying my best to be a good person. Doesn't always work, but I'm trying. Okay, bye guys. Peace out.